Hi, everyone. Welcome to the talk tonight on history of ballroom with Michael Roberson. Delighted that you could join us. It'll be followed by a workshop with Ralph Escamian. I'll introduce them shortly, but I just wanted to begin by recognizing that we're on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. My name is Amjad Holm, Director of SFU's Van City Office of Community Engagement. Just wanted to thank all of the partners that were involved in helping to bring Michael back to SFU. He was here back in the fall where he met a number of people, and luckily we were able to all collaborate again. Henry Daniel is here from the School for Contemporary Arts, where Michael spoke on Tuesday. Travis Solway, who's from the Faculty of Health Sciences. There was a discussion on harm reduction last night. And also wanted to thank the Musa Geddes Foundation based in Guelph, Ontario, that supported some of Michael's work in Toronto as well. Tonight, Michael will be giving a talk first on a short history of ballroom. We'll be taking a short 2-3 minute break where we're going to ask for your participation and helping get the chairs out of the way so we can have Ralph do his workshop. First, to introduce Michael, he's a public health practitioner, activist, leader within the LGBTQS+ community who created the Federation of Ballroom Houses, co-created the National Black Gay Men's Advocacy Group, and the nationally diffused CDC Behavioral Change, HIV Prevention, Intervention, Many Men, Many Voices. Currently, he consults for several national community-based organizations focused on HIV, clinical trial, biomedical, and evidence-based interventions. He's also invested in national community capacity building and mobilization strategies designed to combat the disproportionate health disparities impacting both the Black, Gay, Black, Latino, LGBT house ball communities. And Michael teaches a course on the history of the house ball community at New School University as a member of Ultra Red and is the scholar in residence for the Center for Race, Religion, and Economic Democracy at Union Theological Seminary. Michael earned a Master of Divinity and Master of Sacred Theology degrees from Union Theological Seminary. And Ralph Posh Gvasalia has been in the ballroom scene since 2014, opening his own Kiki House of Gvasalia and joined the Mainstream House of Basquiat in 2021. He's founder and artistic executive director of the nonprofit organization Van Vogue Jam. So Ralph will be joining us later, but please join me in welcoming again Michael Roberson.
Hey. So I don't know who made that bio up, but it was good. That's true. So good. 5 o'clock. So good evening. No. So obviously folks were not with me yesterday or the day before, so I made this announcement that folks who know me well. I am an absolute big fan of choirs. And so when I say good evening, let's say good evening in unison. Good evening. Good evening. So thank you, Em, for the introduction, and thank you for bringing me back here. Thank you for the great Professor Henry Daniel, for his effort in me coming back here. Thank you for Ralph, who decided that he wanted to be in dialogue with me as well, and Professor T, I call it Travis, for also allowing me to be in the space. This is going to be very different than I usually did, kind of. Last night I told people that in my hyper-fantastic imagination, Cornel West is my father and Oprah is my mother. I was more Cornel last night. I'm going to be more Oprah tonight. This will be a facilitated discussion. Last night was more somber because it was looking at the history of the house ball community and its ability to create radical pedagogies in relationship to historical oppressions. Right. And so today we'll do kind of the same thing, but look at performance and Vogue as a hermeneutics of the body. That's nothing but a big word that means how one reads text. So I am going to introduce myself a little more, sort of bring in sort of this energy of Vogue and performance. This will be completely dialogical, completely interactive. I will leave this space in a bit. I will be my Oprah self and say, caller, you say what? No, just joking. I'll be going to this board. We'll have a wonderful discussion. That in which that I and Ralph will do will seem seamless. It's a dialogue. But as Em said, I'm originally from Camden, New Jersey, which is a small inner city across the bridge from Philadelphia. In the U.S., it's a small inner city that has big city problems. My trajectory about Camden I can say this, you can't, is that it's hood, right? Camden and Detroit and Baltimore in the U.S. are very similar cities. And so I grew up there, grew out of a lot of love there, went to college there, graduated from Rutgers University, applied to law school twice, got accepted twice, and put on a waiting list, and I got tired of waiting. So I began working for the Camden City Board of Education as a crisis counselor, which was my entree into public health. And I also began working in 2 hospitals doing psychiatric emergency service per diem, and then I began facilitating a youth discussion support group for LGBT young folk of color at an indigenous Black aid organization in Philadelphia called Colors. And then I began to go to graduate school trying, the word trying is for a reason, trying to get a master's in education and curriculum instruction. This is a wonderful true story. The wonderful thing about working for the Board of Education in the northeast of the U.S. is that when the weatherman forecasts snow and it snows real bad, you don't have to go to work. And when I would wake up in the morning, the weatherman would forecast snow and there was no snow, I started getting mad at God. I said, something has to change. May of 1999, I was sitting home in my living room listening to Maxwell, who's one of my favorite singers. And I heard a voice told me to move to New York City and do the work I want to do with LGBT young folk. 2 months later, July, I put in my resignation with the Board of Education. 2 months later, I moved to New York City with $177 worth of change. And I've been there ever since. I was blessed enough to do some things that Em talked about, and then I got fired in a very public and painful way. And one of the great Greek philosophers, Montaigne, says the philosophy is about learning how to die, and the philosophy was about learning how to die. I went to seminary. Not to be a minister, don't get confused with this performativity. But I wanted to put public health in conversation with theology because it was my assertion that the theological abomination narrative had direct impact on health disparities impacting Black gay men. Ergo, you tell people the very essence of who they are, their breathing, their being, is antithetical to God. And then expecting to engage in protective factors of a body that have been told is no good to God made absolutely no sense, so I wanted to change that narrative. And so I did 2 degrees there, and Ballroom for me became a countercultural response to that. I've been a member of the House Ball community for the past 24 years, been able to do some stuff through Ballroom. Ballroom and its history goes beyond sort of the oftentimes stereotypical notion that it emerged through a documentary called Paris is Burning. We'll put that in contest station. And this thing called Vogue, right? This thing called Vogue. We'll place that same thing in tension that somehow we think that Madonna, yes, that somehow Madonna created. She did do something. She naturalized it. But before Madonna, there were 2 Black women who had Vogue in their videos, Jodie Watley and Queen Latifah. They get not the credit. We'll atone for that tonight. So, that being the case, I'm going to read from 2 small quotes, and then I'm going to bring in the spirit of Vogue and performance in this space through video. I am a member of Sound Art Collective, Em says, talked about, and I will never not, I can't imagine, it's never not, right? I should just say I will not. I will never not do a lecture in Ballroom without audio or video. It does a disservice to me. But I want to read something. Is that one there? One, because we're talking about the hermeneutics of the body of a people, particularly in face of real death, intimate terms with death. Toni Morrison, beloved, said, here in this place, we flesh. Flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in grass. Love it. Love it hard. Love your hands, love them. Raise them up and kiss them. Touch others with them. Pat them together. Stroke them on your face. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. This is flesh I'm talking about here. Flesh that needs to be loved. Feet that need to be rest and dance. Backs that need support. Shoulders that need arms, strong arms. Love your neck. Put a hand on it, grace it, stroke it, and hold it up. And all your inside parts, that they just as seen as slop for hogs. You gotta love them. The dark liver, love it. Love it, and the beat and your beating heart, love that too. More than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw fresh air. More than life holding once and your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart. Here's a community that's been told that the very essence of who they are is not love. But somehow Vogue, or performance, has provided a different space for that. Does anyone here watches RuPaul Drag Race? Yeah. So one of the things I will do is I'm going to lift RuPaul up for what he's been able to do. Right? I remember I said this yesterday, maybe 1992, 1993. I was sitting home watching BET, Black Entertainment Television, and I saw his video. I thought, this is a different time. Yeah. So his ability to do and to place the culture in the landscape of the national imagination has been wonderful. My critique, though, you know what's coming, is that in many ways, RuPaul Drag Race is lodged through a white queer lens. Not a bad thing, just a thing. And when I was younger, that these performances, we called them drag performances only because the language of transgender we didn't have access to. So we called transgender folk drag queens. And it was mostly done by trans women. Not men who went up in drag to perform, but trans women. And this is predominantly in Black and Latinx, Northeastern Latinx communities. And these drag shows were predominantly on a Sunday. That's not accidental. That is the day we were systematically pushed out of church. And so the trans woman performance became the very thing that I went to see every Sunday, the Black woman singing in the choir. That's the hermeneutics of the body. Holding space for a people who was told they were not worthy to be loved. But just like church has done with women, especially Black women, use them as spectacles only, so have Black gay men. Use trans women as spectacles and not interested in their full humanity. So when the lights went down, when the performance was no longer, we were not interested in their full humanity. So what I'm going to show is three things. I'm going to show a iconic trans woman named Princess Janae. She's an icon in the housewall community, icon in the pageant world, and in the show world. And she opens up a play that we did called Nork is Burning with a lip sync performance of Anita Baker, and I think it's Teresa Russell's version of Rhythm of Love. What we did not know was that her body was riddled with pain because she was struggling with cancer. No one knew. She winds up dying not too far over. And oftentimes, almost all the time, when I do these talks, I play this particular performance, one, to demonstrate, to illuminate, particularly for Black gay men, that we all sit in spaces of privilege in what we have done with trans women. Two, to tell the real history of where Ballroom comes from. Not from the ethos of Black gay men or Latinx gay men. Come from the ethos of Black trans women. So I'll do that. Then I'm going to show, since we are doing a workshop on Vogue, I am going to show iconic. Anyone watch Legendary? Leomi. We're going to see Leomi in Paris. We interviewed Leomi in I was going to say make a ballade, 1989, it's not true. In 2009 at the New School. And Leomi said, to be Black, to be Latina, to be trans, and born and reared in the Bronx, I'm angry all the time. She said, I vogue to save my life. James Baldwin said, in the late 50s and 60s, to be Black and relatively race conscious is to be angry all the time. I write to save my life. And then the Exiles of Paris, where you can see Leomi perform in Paris. And then you'll see her good friend and one of the people I love very much, an icon named Javier Ninja, who also vogues in Paris. You'll see two different kinds of Vogue. We're going to talk about the history of Ballroom real shortly, but this history of Vogue and sort of the difference between the three. Is that okay? Is that okay? Yes, that's what I like. So I'll put this out like I put out to everyone. Me and technology, we're not the greatest friends, but I'm getting there. All righty. Here we go. Nope. Here's the wrong one. So we'll do Princess Janae first. And I'm going to ask you to think about three things. I forgot to say this. It's three propositions. What did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel? And for those of you who watch RuPaul's Drag Race, place this in conversation with us. So what did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel?
You know, sometimes it just spins too fast and you not only lose your balance, but you lose your rhythm and It's at times like these that you just need to stop and not only find your way again, but find your own rhythm. Because life has a rhythm and Mother Nature has a rhythm. And love, oh yes, love has a rhythm.
From all the world's insanity, fill her heart with music tonight. Satisfy your soul. I need your mind. Open your arms. Close your eyes. Hearts will harmonize. Making music in your arms. I'll never leave. I need what could see. We need in the rhythm of love, baby. The rhythm of love. Hold me close enough. Times of trouble, there's no doubt. When secure in times like these, the rhythm of love is a remedy. Open your eyes, close your eyes. Hearts will harmonize, making music in your arms. I'll never leave. I need what to see. We have
let's just stay down. Let's stay down. And in her honor, particularly because she is absolutely no longer with us. But thank you for that. What I didn't tell y'all, though, at the very end of this, one of the requirements is for everyone to do that. Just joking. So this is Laomi, and this is in a club in Paris. She lives in the Bronx. They asked her to come, and we'll talk a little later about the Paris scene.
Iconic mother, Laomi in Paris. Faites du bruit, faites un maximum de bruit. DJ,
Javier, same city. Different Vogue. We're going to talk about the difference.
I want to take voguing not to just Paris is burning, but I want to take it to the real Paris and make the real Paris burn. That's what I want to do. My house name is Ninja. Known every corner of the world.
Your third assignment. So I want to this mic's right? I want to open up real briefly. I'm going to do this historical narrative ballroom very quickly. Then since I have a lot of cis women in the room, to know that you are also part of the ballroom community and show a performance of Danielle Ninja as well. But I want to open it up. You saw those videos. What did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel? What did you hear watching them? What did you see watching them? What did you feel watching them? So I'm not open. I can't say, Carla, you say what?
The one thing I noticed was the MC and the way they interacted with the dancer.
Oh, come on. I love someone who does sort of cultural performance studies analysis. Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. We call it the call and response. Be real clear that you're going to hear me talk about the ballroom is a whole bunch of things. One of the things it is a black church. It's a black church, the call and response. There's a dialogical relationship between the MC and the performer, right? And it has metamorphosized differently over the years. Well, thank you for that. Anything else?
I'm good.
You good?
I think that was pretty good.
Anybody else? What did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel? Don't be afraid. No judgment.
The crowd is also like a part of that performance in terms of like sound. You hear the crowd also like playing off the energy that the performer is giving.
Another performance studies person. So a great friend of mine named Robert Simber, he's a member of Sound Art Collective or Ultra Red. Robert says this. Robert says, when you go to a Broadway play, this is your space, and you're not to go beyond that space. But that at a ball, those who are sitting in the audience and those performing are performing simultaneously. There's a relationship that has to happen. So thank you for that. The other thing is, if you heard in the Leomi video, remember I said Leomi said to be black, Latina, trans, growing up in the Bronx, be angry all the time, I Vogue to save my life. You saw the Leomi video, towards the end, what were they doing? Do you remember? Chanting her name. Right? Where can a trans woman go to a space where they chant their name like they're chanting God's name? Thank you for that.
The way the performers were basically kind of like a medium for the music,
Yes.
and like the way they emoted the music,
Yes.
and the way that also connected like with the audience, like it made everybody connected with the like just like everybody was one being at once.
Yes. Cool, I love that. All of y'all, come on, stop. I'll take y'all on tour. Absolutely. You know, one of the things we did a installation at the Parsons School of Design at the new school, Eugene Lane College in New York City. And one of the installations called The Sounds of Ballroom. That the music is our constituents. It's not ornamental. They are constituents, right? There is, when we think about political movements, right? The relationship to the civil rights movement and gospel music is symbiotic. The relationship to ballroom and house music is symbiotic. When I was younger, and they didn't play hip-hop in black gay clubs, came maybe the late 90s day. And when you went into the club, the DJ sat on a booth that was knee-high. Right? And house music, the lyrics was the preaching word. And our dance was the worship. It was a space where you could be erotic and divine at the same time. So thank you for that. Anybody else?
I guess with regard to the performers, the sensuality in their movements and their body, how they're anchored in their bodies, that comes through a lot.
Yeah.
Even from Ninja, where it's very like angles.
Yes.
The body is still very much.
There is, if you saw particularly Naomi when she dipped, we call that the Micheal dip. Now, folks outside of ballroom, I'll say it that way, started calling it a death drop dip. And Ralph happens to be in the house of one of my favorite people in the world, which is Deshawn. Right? Deshawn is the host of Legendary. And Deshawn won a category for $5,000, Vogue. And non-ballroom people, mostly identified as cis and straight, cis and hetero, saw that, black guys, saw the dip, and they started calling it a death drop dip. They started first calling it 5,000, and then the death drop dip. And so people call it the death drop dip, but it's called the Micheal. But, and my mentor, friend now, Dr. Ebony Marshall Terman, Yale, a womanist scholar at Yale, crystallizes it. She calls it, this is the crucifixion and the resurrection. Right? In space. Thank you for that, because now I'm going to open up in a different way. Thank you for that. In a space, because I said this yesterday, that Zora Neale Hurston, African-American, Harlem Renaissance writer, once asserted that black women are the mules of the earth. always trampled on over and over and over again. She says, I oftentimes say that black women are situated as Christ, nailed to the cross, always giving, self-sacrificing, giving to everyone else, nothing left for herself. But if black cis women are the mules of the earth, according to Zerner Hursting, then I say that black trans women are lodged somewhere between Frantz Fanon's notion of the wretched of the earth and Howard Thurman's notion of the disinherited. And still somehow, they make a way out of no way. It's called Ballroom. So I'm going to date myself. I'm a fan of the Golden Girls, and I am going to be Sophia a little bit and do this quick historical narrative through the lens of Sophia. Picture this. True story, though. Picture this. If not for slavery in the U.S., if not for the Emancipation Proclamation, if not for the Black Reconstruction and its dismantle, if not for the rise of Jim and Jane Crow racism in the U.S., the southern part, and the rise of lynching, if not for black folk in the U.S. in the southern part moving from the U.S. to the north, particularly Harlem, New York City. I got Brooklyn though, but Harlem, New York City. And Harlem becomes a new black Mecca. And if not between 19 and 1931, the creation of an artistic, political, radical movement called the Harlem Renaissance. If not for the black church creating a 3-decade campaign in Harlem to get rid of black queers, responding to a Dutch moral report form that said Harlem at the time was the most vice-ridden community in New York City. And these queer folk were making it not respectable. And the church, Abyssinian Baptist Church in particular, Adam Clayton Powell Sr. specifically, used the church to sermonize against it, owned the Amsterdam News and published these sermons in the newspaper, published them in other publications. And there were 3 ways that black queers congregated during that time. Beauty salons, having rent parties, and drag balls. And drag balls become the largest movement, right? Political, I call it theological. So my first assertion about house ball ballroom history is that it's a BlackTrans-Womanist theological discourse because it creates itself in contestation to the black church that says theologically we matter. What does it mean to leave the southern part of the U.S. escaping, looking for freedom, and to become unfree in the space you're supposed to be free? Become homeless in your new home. Then after World War II, where other cities become blacker in the U.S., Detroit, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, these drag balls migrate. But in 1967, the black trans woman in Crystal LaBeija resisted racism in the pageant drag ball circuit. She walks off the stage. If you want to watch, you can watch the whole, it's interesting, documentary and the little clip of her on YouTube called The Queen, or The Legend of Crystal LaBeija. But she resisted. She walks off the stage critiquing colorism and racism, and a guy named Phil Black, who was the only African-American drag performer who had the Screen Actors Guild card at the time. He whispers, the whisper is my reimagination, I don't know if he whispered. He whispered, and Crystal's ear and said, let's go back to our old Harlem drag ball circuit. And we'll have a ball named it after you. And the very first house was created in 1968 called the House of LaBeija. Now let me tell you the difference. Harlem drag ball meant that the contestants, the performers, are only trans women. We called it drag ball because we called trans women at that time drag queens. But when in 67 her resistance, and in 68 she created a house, it became a very different thing. Not individual, but the collective. House of LaBeija named after her mother and children. There was the 5, I call them freedom fighters, that emerged at the time to become the mothers of the modern house ball community. Pepper LaBeija, Dorian Corey, Avis Pendarvis, Duchess LaWong, and Paris Dupree. That's between 67 and 73. Why 73? Because 1973 was the very first time a gay man participated in the ballroom community. So for almost 50 years, only trans women participated. You wouldn't think that if you go to a ball today. Because of our patriarchy, gay men have taken it over. And our disability to push back on our shit, excuse my language. And then you begin to see other houses emerge, many houses in the 70s. And the 80s even more so. And so that second and third tenet about Ballroom is that it is a freedom movement too, because it moves and migrates across the country in contestation to systemic oppression. But in the 70s, just like other art movements in the 70s, I could talk about hip-hop. Next year is the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. I could talk about salsa, the New Eureka Poem movement. It becomes an art collective and a political movement because it uses artistry, not only as a collective of a group, houses, right, but to politicize the disenfranchised people, particularly because 1981 happens, and this is the surveillance of 41 gay men who have gay cancer, GRID, AIDS. We were here yesterday, we had a longer conversation about that, but we're not, because one of the things I want to do is talk about that fourth tenet, which is Vogue. Our ability to use performance in Vogue as an organizing tool. 1990 happens. One of the most emblematic events happened, two of the most emblematic events happened at the same time. Madonna's Vogue and Paris is Burning as a documentary. Now, Paris is Burning is one of the most artistically, wonderfully, most watched documentaries of all time. Artistically wonderful, culturally exploitative. And it's through the lens of a white queer woman named Jenny Livingston. She does a wonderful job artistically. But there's a lot of critique. I'll talk about Judith Butler's critique and then critique her. Right. Judith Butler has a great critique of it, but it's short-sighted to some degree. And then Madonna does Vogue, and she uses a couple of people in the ballroom community, extravaganzas, in her video. To today, Madonna has never talked about where she got the cultural production of Vogue from. Even though, as I said earlier, Queen Latifah and Jodie Watley had Vogue in their videos. As a ballroom, what it did, though, was because Madonna nationalized it. What we did was we were able to use Vogue to organize ballrooms across the country. And all of a sudden in the 90s, there's an explosion of ballroom geographical regions. In the Midwest, in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, in Oakland, right? More in the Midwest. And then, speaking of these two locations, one location, Paris. At the time, the person identified as a young black gay man leaves Paris, La Sandra, looking because there was no black gay community. So this is late 80s, early 90s, more early 90s. Comes to New York City looking for a black gay community, goes to the piers in the village, to the Greenwich Village, where gay folk particularly congregate, finds a house ball community on the pier, and winds up joining the house, of Ninja, stays in the US for a little bit, and goes back to Paris and creates the Paris Ballroom, which winds up creating the Paris black LGBT community. And so you begin to then see the salacious relationship between Europe and ballroom. It's salacious, right? Salacious for one reason, because marginalized communities are oftentimes, unfortunately, looking to be seen by those who they think have more power or more value. And at the same time, it's salacious because it does give visibility to a community who's been rendered invisible, unimportant, and it happens to save lives. And so the difference between the Paris scene and even the Sao Paulo, Brazil scene versus the Russia, and there's a scene in Sweden, there's a scene in London, there's a scene in Glasgow, Scotland, there's a scene in Mexico City, is that both of those scenes were created and derived from marginalized black folk, where other scenes oftentimes have been capitalized through corporate sponsorship and Vogue competitions. And still, it's still one scene. This is the beauty of ballroom. To be so underground and yet hyperly visible. How does that happen? How does, through the ethos of black trans women that had no language called trans in the Harlem Renaissance in the 1900s in Harlem, New York City, winds up almost 100 years later around the world? That's magical. That's mystical. Absolutely wonderful. So this is where we're going to what time is it? Because I can go. As y'all can see. I got 5 more minutes? I do? Oh, real quick, though, real quick. So it's 10 to 6? All right, 10 to 6. So real quick, I want to throw a couple things out for you to ask you, when you hear the word Vogue, what comes to your mind? Throw it out. Magazine. Uh-huh. Anybody else? Vogue, what comes to your mind? The hand gestures. What else? Fashion. What else? Community. I like that one. Not that I like yours. But what else? Anything else? Sexuality. Hey, come on now. Sexuality. Yes. I love, was it you who said the word about the sensuality of the body? Yeah. The audacity of people to do that when they're told that this is antithetical to that, right? So I read that thing from Toni Morrison. Love your flesh. Anything else? Vogue. You're going like this. You want to say something? Yeah, sure. Family. God bless you. Yeah. Really, because this thing, community, family, this kinship structure that was created in 68, remember houses, have saved lives. And people don't get it and don't understand it. This mother, father, we call it gay mother, gay father. Sometimes it's called house mother, house father. They could be one and the same, and sometimes they're not, have saved lives. Particularly when folks have been ostracized and pushed out of community, ostracized and pushed out of their own family because of their sexuality. It has saved lives. During the AIDS epidemic, it had saved lives. It still saves lives. This community is on the most intimate terms with death. We were having this conversation yesterday. When I went back to graduate school between 2010 and 2014, I lost 55 people from the community. The ritualization of RIP is real. And so these spaces, family, are utterly so important. Last thing I say about that is that for the most part, that a lot of folks, gay father or gay mother or house father, house mother, is more involved in their lives than their family of origin. So important, so thank you. Anything else? Fighting. Oh, you said fighting? Why you say that? No, absolutely, it's messy. Ballroom's messy. We're not going to, we won't hotel it. All right? We won't sanitize it. It absolutely is messy. The world is violent. And ballroom is reflective of the universe. In fact, it's my assertion, because of its origins, because of its ability to migrate across the world, because of its demographic, predominantly in the U.S. context, Black, Latinx, LGBTQ, it can teach the world over about what it means to be human in the struggle for freedom in the face of catastrophe, because it had to. Because it had to. So, I can go on. I'm not going to go on. What I am going to do is show this last performance, because oftentimes folk think, and I know, especially when we saw Leomi, we were like, oh my God, I can't do that. That folk think that the community is only gay men and trans women. But cis women have been a part, particularly of the modern ballroom community, forever. And in fact, in the beginning, because of New York City only, cis women who identified as heterosexuals were mostly in the community, before those who identify as lesbian and then butches and all this other thing. Partly because of the relationship between Black gay men and Black women. So the community, high numbers of cis women who are legends, who are icons, and I'm going to show you the legendary Danielle Polanco Ninja. Danielle is a choreographer. She was the choreographer for Pose, Omarion, Janet Jackson, Beyonce, but she walks women's performance, and I will show you her right here. There she goes. And so what I'll do real briefly, I forgot to do this real quick. So what Danielle is doing is women's performance, right? And in the beginning, this contestation between Madonna and Vogue in 1990, Vogue was created, there's a conflict where it was created. Paris Dupree, one of the mothers of the ballroom community in the early 70s, or trans women in jail. It's probably the same story, right? But it was originally called pop, dip, and spin. Because you popped, you dipped, and you spun. And then people in the 80s who were able to be acrobatic, as you saw Javier Ninja, started doing those things. And they said, well, it's a little different. So we'll call pop, dip, and spin old way. And what Javier was doing was called new way. And trans women, we call them femme queen and ballroom, so they've always been doing femme queen performance. There's a reductionist in the way they perform and the way that we say they should perform. But then in the early 90s, young gay, black and Latino gay men in New York City on the piers began to emulate trans women voguing. So they created a category for them called butch queen voguing like a femme queen, right? Which be myself or Ralph voguing like Danielle if she was a trans woman. Because the idea was that you're supposed to be soft. Here's the reductionist thing, Judith Butler's critique, that these people are only performing cis women in hyper-notions of femininity. Right? They're supposed to be soft. And then a guy named Mystery Dior comes around. And he puts on, he always had something over his head. One, because he really wasn't out. Two, because of his thing called Mystery. And he would be dramatic. And they didn't see it. They said, no, chop, 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 until they did see it. And then it changed from butch queen voguing like a femme queen to butch queen vogue femme, soft versus dramatic. So those are the vogues. You have old way, new way, they come from pop, dip, and spin. Old way, new way, femme queen performance, butch queen, vogue, and film, soft and dramatic. So that's all I have. Did I get you?